Hello, my name is Scott Frank, and I'm an audiologist with Salem Audiology Clinic, and we're doing a series of videos with our patients on their specific situations, because so often it's more important with hearing loss to understand the ins and outs of it from a patient perspective to help other people out there who might need help to know what to look for. So I want to introduce to you Mr. Michael Black, who's been a long-time patient with us, coming to us I think for over 10 years.
Since 2004.
Yep, so for quite a while, coming up on, well, we're at 15 years now.
Right.
So anyway, today's video is all about him and his story. So we're going to start off by just talking to him about his hearing loss. And so when you noticed your hearing loss for the first time, how did it kind of manifest? When did you start to suspect it was going on?
The first time that I noticed was decades ago in a law enforcement situation where I recognized that on my left side I was really missing high frequency sounds. Like I had a wristwatch that I could hear ticking here but not here, and that was the first clue. But overall, other than that observation, things seemed just fine until in the 90s, I worked for a construction company in their training division, and everybody in the company got hearing tests annually. And it was then that I was tested and discovered that I indeed had serious hearing loss in both ears. Profound is what I was told in the left ear. So when I went to an audiologist then, I was told that the hearing aids they could fit me with would just make everything loud, and that really wasn't a solution because all of the lower frequencies were normal. So I left it be, and for many years wound up saying "huh" an awful lot. But then later on, working at a local college, our administrative assistant had contact with a local audiologist and referred me there. I had been to 2 or 3 other service providers and didn't feel comfortable with what I was being offered. But then I found a solution, and certainly with the more current technology, then I had a solution that would work with my particular hearing loss. The digital audio solution that the lower frequencies that were still relatively normal were not, didn't need assistance, but the higher frequencies definitely did. So I've been real pleased with the ability to, just like wearing my glasses, to be able to hear more clearly with the devices.
Okay. And so how did, before you had the hearing loss treatment, how is that affecting you on a day-to-day basis? You said saying "huh" and "what" a lot, but you talk about or think about any specific situations where it caused you some problems.
In a different profession, I was in a lot of social settings, Chamber of Commerce and leadership meetings and things like that. And anytime it was a reception kind of situation and I was trying to hear 1 or 2 speakers and there was a lot of sound in the background, I would just get really frustrated and tired, real tired, and I would finally just leave. And in other office settings or maybe meeting settings, I was always straining to hear. I was always asking for a repeat. If it was a soft, high frequency voice, I could pretty well forget being able to understand what that person was saying. I needed resonance, like my own voice, to be able to understand what people were saying. So overall, it was pretty frustrating, and I had to ask people. I had 2 choices: either miss what was being said or ask for things to be repeated. And my office mates in the more recent situation became as impatient with it as I did, and that's when I finally, gave in to seeking some applicable solution. That became the devices.
And so once you got your hearing aids, tell me about the differences that you noticed. What were some of the immediate differences, and then how did those improvements impact your life?
The first time that I was working with some demo, that vendor said, "Let's set you up with some demonstration devices and see if this is going to be a good solution." And so that evening, out for a walk with my wife, I would continue to stop and say, "What's that? What's that?" And it turned out to be a sprinkler, water sprinkler. It turned out to be a bird chirping. It turned out to be leaves rustling. High frequency sounds that I recognized right away had been completely out of my experience without the correction, without the devices. So right away, I was not only hearing those sort of environmental sounds, and including the volume on the television. We no longer needed it up at 10, 11, 12, 14, which was not comfortable for my wife. But we could bring it down to a much more natural volume. So I was picking up sounds that I had been missing, realized that I had been missing for easily for 15 or 20 years.
Now, you're a performer as well, professional singer, and
I don't know if I'd call it professional, but I sing in choruses and I sing in a quartet.
well, way more professional than the karaoke that I try to do, that my family shames me on. But anyway, so for what you do as a singer, tell me about how the hearing loss affected you there and about the positive effects since you got the hearing aids.
Especially singing in a quartet, it mattered a lot because in the configuration of the quartet, I have the tenor voice, the very high notes on my left side, and the bass voice, low notes on the right side. And I was always able to hear the bass, but coming back with the devices, now all of a sudden these bright notes were really, actually were overpowering because it was something I hadn't been hearing for so long. And now with the desire to blend with the four voices, which is the task in a quartet, came back in and we were able to the audiologist was able to put a music setting in the devices so that when I was back with the quartet, or even with the chorus, I was able to go to that music setting and it would bring down all of the shrillness of those high frequencies, but they were still there comfortably so that I could blend. So it made a lot of difference in my confidence to be able to sing in both the chorus and the quartet and blend with the other voices.
Now, you talked right there about confidence, and I think that comes into play a lot of time when people are getting used to how their own voice sounds and everything. And you talked about when you were first wearing the hearing aids, the shrillness of it. A lot of it has to do with, in my opinion, people, as you were saying, people getting used to what they haven't been hearing for a while. It takes some time to do that. So that's why I like to compare. I try to get people to not think of getting hearing aids as like buying a device. It's more like physical therapy. It's a process you go through that over time you adjust to what you haven't had before. If you were to injure your arm and to need physical therapy for that, they don't have you lifting heavy weights initially.
Mm-hmm.
They start with light weights and move you towards heavier weights when you get stronger. So as you were talking about, the audiologist made some adjustments to maybe back things off a little bit until you were ready for more.
Sure.
And then when you were ready for more, brought you back and gave it to you.
Well, that's how we started. We started with some sort of. My recollection is remembering the results of the comprehensive hearing exam. We started with the physical therapy of bringing it up gradually. It was, the word that comes to mind is a shock, but a pleasant shock in that all of a sudden I'm hearing all of this sound that I've been missing for quite some time. And so the discovery was more enjoyable than anything else. The realization that now I'm hearing all of these new sounds. The other experience was in adjusting. I like your analogy of the physical therapy because in the adjusting to the change, I recognize something that I had experienced many years earlier when my father was a radio announcer and I would be in the station with him. And he would have me go into one of the sound booths and work with headsets and microphone. I recognized my voice then was sounding just like that radio experience. And so it took a little bit of time to adjust, to accommodate to that. But the benefit and the pleasure was so much that I just let it happen and enjoyed it. And then Um, in the first period of time, I don't recall, over weeks, then I would come back in for another adjustment and we'd bring it up a little bit, bring it up a little bit. And the increase in clarity, whether I was in the office setting, in the different singing situations in the car, listening to the radio, all of a sudden the volume is at a great deal lower setting for both me and my wife passenger. And so all of those adjustments were so positive. I relate the same experience to wearing the eye correction. Is okay, without it, here's my experience. With the correction, both visual and both auditory is really positive, really pleasant.
So in regards to you being a singer, that is one thing in regards to getting used to your own voice, but I do find that with just about every patient, particularly first-time users, getting used to the sound quality of their own voice is a trick, and we have to kind of work with that over time. And this relates to you were talking about having the confidence and everything. Well, when people are talking to each other, we're always self-conscious about how our own voice sounds. So if you're not used to how your voice sounds, and you're talking to someone, you feel a little bit conspicuous about how loud your voice sounds because you're in the situation where you're having to carry on a conversation. And getting used to your own voice in that capacity can be tricky because you're worried about what the other person is thinking. So what I tell people to do, and that's one reason why, I'm not sure if the camera can capture it, but in the background here we have a couple copies of Green Eggs and Ham. What I often recommend people do is, when you get hearing aids for the first time, go home, get a book. It could be Dr. Seuss or just about anything else, and read out loud to yourself.
Okay.
Because in that situation, you're by yourself. You're completely in control of the situation. There's nobody else around for you to worry about how you sound to them, and it helps you to get used to your own voice. That's some advice I give out to just about every person who's a first-time user, and anyone who, regardless of their experience with hearing aids, they have some issues with how their voice sounds initially because they need to get used to hearing their voice the way they ought to hear it. So moving on, I just have one last question for you. Is that if you came across somebody saw your video on our YouTube channel and walked up to you and said they saw it and asked you for advice, what advice would you give them if they were contemplating, if they felt like they had hearing loss and they were just kind of getting started and needing help, or that was, for that matter, somebody who had hearing aids, weren't happy with how they're working and were wondering what they could do to make things better? What advice would you give them?
Well, the way I got started was with word of mouth, that I valued the reference, the recommendation that I was receiving. She had expressed that 2 of her family members had been served by this particular audiologist, and so that's how I followed up on that. So it happens to me quite regularly when somebody will say, "Oh, you're wearing hearing aids." And I said, "You bet." And I'm enjoying them. Are you experiencing some kind of, we get into that dialogue of their hearing experience and the difficulties they've had. And so I express what my experience was in getting a comprehensive hearing exam that I was confident was determining the details of my hearing ability or lack of ability. So I would encourage them to seek a comprehensive hearing exam and then listen with that provider for options, and options that they were confident would fit for them. Recently, I have had a couple of occasions where I've had an acquaintance who already had hearing devices and expressed frustrations with them, the experience that they were having. And here again, based on the positive experience that I've had for over 15 years, I have the confidence of recommending them to a particular vendor to say, I'm fully confident that you will get useful, meaningful information and options, and then you can decide what option is going to be most comfortable for you. Or in the case here recently where I had an acquaintance that had devices and he would wear them and then not wear them, and he was frustrated with them, I was fully confident that my referral would be a solution for him to find out, were these devices even correct for him anyway? And if so, then they could be adjusted so that he would have a positive experience with the benefit derived from wearing those. So I have just last night talked with him and learned that was, for him, it was a positive experience, and he's going to wear them regularly. And we talked about the accommodation. We talked about it'll take a little bit of an adjustment to hear a new situation, but learn to enjoy it.
So that kind of wraps up what we were planning on doing today, just giving you an introduction to Mr. Black. He's actually working through us evaluating new products, just kind of like we've done with another patient. We have him in a set of new instruments that are from a specific manufacturer, and he's utilizing them to evaluate how well they work and some of their claims on their performance. And in our next video, he's going to express what his experience has been and how well they've worked for him. So thanks again for coming in for this.